Good evening. I'm Lonnie Stonich, the Executive Director of FAN, and I'm so excited to welcome you to tonight's conversation between Logan Ury and Eli Finkel. Thanks for attending. FAN is a nonprofit organization that presents a high-quality speaker series offered free to the public on a wide variety of topics, including human development, mental health, education, and social justice, among others. We have over 100 videos of past events archived on our website and our YouTube channel, so please be sure to explore. And now for formal introductions. Logan Ury is a behavioral scientist turned dating coach and the author of How to Not Die Alone, the surprising signs that will help you find love. As the director of relationship science at the dating app Hinge, she leads a research team dedicated to helping people find love. After studying psychology at Harvard, she ran Google's behavioral science team, the Irrational Lab. Ms. Ury's work has appeared in the New York Times, The Atlantic, Time, The Washington Post, GQ, Glamour, Vice, and on HBO and the BBC. Eli Finkel is the author of The All or Nothing Marriage and is a professor at Northwestern University, where he has appointments in the psychology department and the Kellogg School of Management, and holds the Martin J. and Patricia Koldyke Outstanding Teaching Professorship. In his role as director of Northwestern's Relationships and Motivation Lab, RAM Lab, he has published 130 plus scientific articles and is a regular contributor to the op-ed page of the New York Times. His research, which is supported by the National Science Foundation and the National Institutes of Health, has been honored with the Daniel M. Wegner Theoretical Innovation Prize. It's now my pleasure to introduce to you both Logan Ury and Eli Finkel.
Hello.
Hey there, I have successfully unmuted. It's good to see you, Logan.
Yeah, great to see you.
So before I get to you, I just want to share with everybody that I'm really psyched to be here. We're going to leave plenty of time at the end for Q&A, so I hope you'll be taking notes as you go along. Logan's eager to take questions and offer commentary on those things. It's my pleasure, honestly, my pleasure to be here. I love working with FAN, and it's an especial pleasure to talk to Logan about her new book. I've known Logan for years. I've worked with her for a long time. I'm lucky enough to call her a friend. And I wanted very much to like her book, and I liked it even more than I hoped that I would. It has wit, it has verve, it is the latest social science and written in such a practical way. So I think we're in for a treat, and I do recommend the book very highly. So Logan, on to you.
Thank you so much for having me. Yeah.
Sure. Okay, so this is going to require a little bit of computing, I think, because you're still a young person, and yet you got this degree in psychology, and then there was Google, and then there was Airbnb, and then you left the gravy train with the regular salary to live this life as a relationships coach, and now you wrote this book, and now you're at Hinge. So talk to us a little bit about this. Do you see like a linear path that got you to this moment, or is this like a bunch of reboots?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. And also I'll mention along the way when you and I synced up and what role you've played in my career and everything that I've learned from you. So I've really always had these two interests. On one hand, psychology and the science of decision making. And on the other hand, dating, sex, relationships. And so in college, I studied a little bit of both. I studied psychology with a minor in women, gender, and sexuality. When I graduated from college, I went to work at Google, and I had this very unusual job. Eli, I think you know about this. And if you didn't, it was in the book that I ran the porn pod, which was managing the Google ads for these porn advertisers, sex toy operators. A very surprising job. When your 22-year-old daughter graduates from Harvard, that's not what you expect her to come home on Thanksgiving and tell you that she does. But there we go. And so after a year of that, I just decided I don't really think this is where my career is going to go. And so I ended up being able to create this role working with our mutual friend and the person who introduced us, Dan Ariely. And if that name sounds familiar to people listening, he is the wonderful behavioral scientist, the author of Predictably Irrational and many books. And so I worked and learned alongside Dan for several years running this team called the Irrational Lab, the behavioral science team. And that really is where I was able to do what I'm doing now, which I love, which is taking these ideas from academia. Things like if you reinforce somebody's identity in a particular realm, then you can change their behavior. And I was able to do that with Google products and Google marketing. But at the same time, I was single and I was struggling and I was using the apps, and I looked around me, all these Google geniuses, these wizards that invented the internet. And I was like, these people are struggling too. And I tried to figure out what are ways that I can help us learn. And so I started this speaker series, Talks at Google Modern Romance, which you eventually came and spoke at. And I really tried to find different ways to bridge these two things. And so, yes, I did end up going to Airbnb. But the way that this has really emerged is working one-on-one as a dating coach, which was a great way of just figuring out what are the common problems that people have, what are the things that I know from the field of behavioral science that can help them, what are the interventions that make a difference. And now I've had the opportunity to bring that to the world, both through the work at Hinge, which is helping millions of people date in a different environment by changing the app, and then of course with my book that just came out, which tries to take the best of behavioral science, the study of how we make decisions, and combine it with the best of relationship science, your field, how love works. And so it's been really fun for me to take these two fields, translate them, make them accessible, create actionable advice, and really bring them to people and hopefully help them find love.
It's been fun for me to watch the outcomes of all of that. So we'll get to the book. Before we do that, I have a couple other questions on this career track thing. First, can you tell us anything about this relationship coaching thing? Like, I think a lot of people don't really know that's a thing, or maybe they've heard about it. Like, who goes for relationship coaching? Who's especially likely to benefit from it? Is there anything that you can say in broad brushstrokes about how you approach your life as a relationships coach?
Yeah. Okay. So the first thing that I'll say humbly is that this is not a certified thing. This is not like being a therapist where you go through years of training and you sign an ethical thing. You're basically saying, I have something I have to say about dating, and do you want to pay me on an hourly rate to hear my advice? And sometimes people just show up and they sit on your couch and they're willing to pay for it. So I would definitely just say humbly that it's sort of a something that I've made up or navigated on my own. But it's essentially that there is a world of coaching. I love therapy, have done many types of therapy. My mother-in-law is a therapist and I've learned a lot from her. I think that's why her son is a great partner. But this is something different. Therapy is a lot about exploring who you are and what happened to you and talking about it. Coaching really is a good fit for me because I'm just so proactive. I want to sit you down and I want to say, Eli, you've been doing this for this reason. You need to get out there and do this. Here's
I
your homework
know.
assignment, right? I like
I
to give
know.
homework, and I,
Yeah.
I like to be proactive. And so the coaching is really, obviously it's a luxury service. It's not covered by insurance, but it's somebody coming to me and saying, I've been dating for a while. I'm frustrated. I'm stuck and I want a plan. And so they're basically outsourcing their worries to me and they want me to tell them what to do. And it's sort of like having, a wise friend or an older sister or somebody who's really invested in you. But I think I do give better advice than people's friends because so often our friends are enabling. Oh, he didn't split, he split the bill with you, kick him to the curb. He's not a long-term partner. And I think our friends are trying to protect us, but they actually lead us astray. So people are paying me to sort of take on their worry and give them research backed advice. And one final thing I'll say is that many of my clients are male, which might surprise some people, but I think it's because I use terms like sunk cost fallacy and loss aversion, and it makes these men feel very safe with me. And the thing is, I'm giving the same advice to men and women, but I think by
Oh.
couching it in research, it feels safe for everyone to, or a certain type of person to engage with me.
Interesting. So the
Yeah,
hard science framing is a mail catcher, I guess. One more thing about career stuff. So
sure.
you're now at Hinge. You've been there
Yeah,
now for a while. You've
yeah.
you've been doing a lot of research at Hinge. One of the upsides, I presume, of working at Hinge is just the rate at which data come in,
Hmm.
right? Like, somebody like me has to post flyers and recruit, but Hinge, the data just come in all the time. And yet, here we are in the midst of what surely must be like the weirdest period of dating since dating started, or at least one of the weirdest periods with the pandemic. What is happening with Hinge, the research stuff in general, and do you have any thoughts about people who are single and looking and feel like, my goodness, is it going to be forever before I can start dating again? How can I go about doing that?
Yeah, so actually, I know we have some people from Northwestern listening. And so my partner in crime at Hinge is this woman, Dr. Emily Hittner, and she has a PhD from Northwestern. And together we run this research team called Hinge Labs. And so imagine us last year, we both started in March. We were ready to hit the ground running and learn everything about dating and teach everything about dating. And of course, March was also the beginning of the pandemic in the US. And so it really has informed what the last year has looked like for us. So our first big project was all about video dating. And I can share some interesting stats that came out of that research. So one of them is that before the pandemic, almost no one had done video dating. Now the majority of Hinge users have tried it. The biggest reason why people don't try video dating is they think it'll be awkward, but 81% of people who tried it say it's not at all awkward. So anyone listening who has been hesitating or waiting to try it, I encourage you to give it a chance. One stat that really stuck out to us was that 43% of men said that they would define the relationship or DTR with someone who they had only met over video. And so, really, we've just been so impressed by the creativity and the resilience of people who are not taking this year off from dating. And so, for anyone listening, I would say video dating is a thing. It's a low pressure vibe check. It's the new coffee date. Just give it a chance. You can do a 15-minute FaceTime call. Just see if you have compatibility with somebody. See if there's some chemistry there. And really, if you're someone who has been taking the year off from dating since the pandemic started, give yourself a chance to try this. I think you might be impressed by some of the silver linings of dating in the COVID world.
I know I am not the only one on this call who read your very moving Modern Love column about in the New York Times a few weeks ago, something like that, 3 maybe.
Mm-hmm.
And it was I knew the story in advance, and I can tell you that I was highly moved reading it. I think I texted you something like, you didn't warn me that I would need a hanky. And but not everybody knows about it. So just by
Sure.
way of setting you up, and just so that everybody knows, I asked you in advance whether you
Oh,
were
of course.
comfortable
I'm very
talking about this
comfortable.
here. So you were very serious about this man, about Scott.
Mm-hmm.
Everything's moving along well, engaged to be married, pretty serious cancer diagnosis, followed pretty rapidly by an amputation of a lower leg. Talk to us. Tell us a
Yeah.
little bit about what it was like for a 32-year-old woman to go through that, what it's been like for Scott, what it's been like for the two of you.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many ways that I can answer this. And the first thing that comes to mind is that I have been getting some pushback on the title of the book. So the book is called How to Not Die Alone. And people are saying, you are acting like the only thing that matters is finding a romantic partner. And lots of people are very happy without it. And first of all, I totally agree. The title is a bit of marketing. It's supposed to be memorable and provocative. And also, one thing I should say is that, Eli, if you wrote a book called How to cook French food, nobody would say, why are you saying that the only thing we can do in the world is
Yeah.
cook French food? You'd say, for
Yeah.
those of us who want to cook French food, we should do it.
Yeah.
And so, anyway, I share that to say, while I've been focusing on romantic relationships and I'm really interested in relationship science, I actually invest a lot of time into friendships and community and what you have so brilliantly coined as OSOs, other significant others. And so that's what the New York Times article is really about. That last year, at the beginning of the pandemic, as you mentioned, my then fiance, now husband, was diagnosed with osteosarcoma, which is a rare form of bone cancer. And sort of as the pandemic was taking off and the world felt so chaotic, we were also navigating this additional really hard layer of this diagnosis. And so in this one whirlwind weekend, we had a foot roast. That was his request. Instead of a rehearsal dinner, we had our friends gathered on a rooftop to talk about his soon to be departed right foot. We had a last minute wedding, masked and socially distanced. And then the day after that, he had a below the knee amputation. And this was just such a dark time. I mean, you're dealing with thoughts about mortality. You are dealing with really bad news. And it was just so isolating. Like, nobody could come over. Our family from the East Coast couldn't visit us. And so what ended up happening was that some of our close friends had started this communal living sort of house plus outdoor area and 1-bedroom apartments in Oakland. And through a series of good fortune, we ended up moving in. And so we ended up moving into this commune. We've had 12 housemates, and it's just so unusual. You don't really expect, I mean, you don't expect to get married and then move into a commune 2 months later, and even living in a commune during COVID. It's just a really surprising situation, but it's been incredible because we're surrounded by these other significant others. And the work that you and Elaine Chung have done really suggests that we expect too much from our partners, and that if we can actually find different people to fulfill discrete needs in our lives, things like the person I talk to about politics, the person I talk to about work, the person I work out with, the relationship itself is healthier because we are asking people to fulfill what they can and want to fulfill, and not more than that. And so living in this commune, it's called Radish, and being surrounded by people who love us, it's just been, I would say, the best way to survive a really hard time. And I say in the article that I felt like the lights came on. And so it's just been a really lucky thing for us because it was so isolating. And even though we're still in the middle of the treatment and it's very hard, we have these people around us who are really supporting us. And so, yes, my research so far has really focused on romantic relationships, but I think the underlining message here is that relationships, plural, are what define the quality of our lives, and friends are a big part of that.
So when you write your follow-up about the commune experience, will you please call it How Not to Do French Cooking Alone? It would work, right? You could sort of combine the two.
Oh, yeah.
All right.
I know. I love that. My friends sometimes will text me how to not fry alone,
Okay.
group cooking with the Foreman grill, or
Yeah.
I welcome anyone's how to not fly alone, making friends on a plane. So I welcome your sequel titles.
You have your like chicken soup for the soul hook here.
There we
Oh,
go.
okay. So the book, really
Let's do
serious
it.
about the book. I was going to ask you about the title. I'm glad you talked a little bit about
Yeah.
that. The book, broadly speaking, has
Mhm.
3 sections:
Mhm.
getting out there, getting ready, and getting serious. Can you give us just a brief sense of how you came up with that sort of structure, and again, like a 30,000-foot perspective on what the 3 sections do?
Yeah, absolutely. And so really the 30,000 foot view is that the frame is behavioral science, and it's this idea that a great relationship is the culmination of good decisions. You make good decisions along the way, you propel yourself into this wonderful partnership. You make bad decisions and you are just stuck repeating the same patterns over and over again. And so I mentioned this, but the title, How to Not Die Alone, this is what it's supposed to do. Imagine that you're in an airport and you see this book title, How to Not Die Alone, and you stop in your tracks and you think, what path am I on? Am I on a path towards dying alone? Do I want to be on that path? And if the answer is no, then this book is the directional shift to help you go in a different direction, making different choices and winding up somewhere else. And so, yeah, the first section is getting ready. It's about what's holding you back from finding love. What are the dating blind spots preventing you? How are you getting in your own way? It's some of the basics, things like attachment theory, one of the best research parts of relationship science. Things like what matters more and less than we think in romantic relationships, a chapter that you really influenced. Then there's getting out there, and that's just online dating in some ways has become a game, and how can you actually be in control of it, and how can you make better decisions there? And so how can you make online dating work for you? How can you meet people in real life, whenever that is? Of course, there's this chapter, F the Spark, which has kind of taken on a life of its own. And it's really about why you should give more people a chance and go on the second date. And then the last section, Getting Serious, it's about navigating relationship transitions, deciding, not sliding. Should we define the relationship? Should we move in together? Should we break up? Should we get married? And then it ends with this philosophy of intentional love, this idea of being in the driver's seat of your life and really making choices so that you can grow and adapt as your relationship grows and adapts with you.
Yeah, I love it. And I was pleasantly surprised to see that you take the idea of breaking up quite seriously.
Oh
You
yeah,
help.
it's one of my favorite things.
Yeah, it's like, I didn't know that, but certainly in the
I
book.
mean, it's a great way to get people into good relationships, is helping
Yeah.
them get out of bad ones.
Yeah, so I'll come back to it. This
Sure.
idea of like how you, like when and how, like when a
Yeah.
breakup is the right choice
Yeah.
and how to go about doing that. Like your book is so sort of applied and hands-on at helping
Very
people. I
applied,
could see the
yeah.
coaching voice in the book. And by the way, this is probably as good a time as any to remind everybody watching here that we will be leaving plenty of time for Q&A. So I hope you are buttering up your questions. Okay, so you've got these 3 broad sections of the book. early in the book, you make a claim that I find interesting. You say dating today is harder than ever before. So you can imagine skeptics, right? You could easily imagine somebody from the 80s saying, yeah, how hard is it that you have to like take your phone out and swipe to the right? Like you, millennial, don't have any idea what it was like to have like a void and no obvious place to go where there were bevies of single people. So in what sense is dating harder today than it's been in the past?
Yes, I'm glad you brought that up, and also I welcome a debate with you. I think that's a good point, and there are definitely people listening who might think dating is so much easier now, but I will lay out my argument. And so first I should start by saying there are these so-called thin markets, things like LGBTQ plus community, the over 50 community, people in rural areas. It is definitely easier to date with the dating app than without it, because instead of saying who else in my community is over 50 and single and potentially interested in me, you open up your phone and it's there. But really what I'm trying to say here is that deciding who to invest in, deciding how to choose, that's just become so hard. And of course, I'm sure many people listening are familiar with the paradox of choice and the idea that we want choice, but too much choice often leads us to feeling overwhelmed, doubting our decision, and sometimes even decision paralysis, not making any decision at all. There's also this idea, which of course I'm very influenced by your book, The All or Nothing Marriage, that expectations for marriage are now sky high. And as you say in the book, and we discuss in the video we made together, today has the best marriages of all time, but people are also getting divorced for reasons that our grandparents would never have imagined. And so because we expect to be self-actualized from marriage, we really put a lot of pressure on ourselves to choose the right partner. And so it might surprise you to hear that I have a decent number of peers and millennials who say to me, I wish I could be in an arranged marriage. Who thinks that I'm the right person to set myself up? I've been trying for 12 years and I've gotten nowhere. Tell me who you think's a good match. I'll commit to them and let's make it work. And so there's really this feeling of our lives are these empty notebooks that we fill and we define our own identities. But that's a lot of pressure, because when you don't like the story that's written, you can only blame yourself. And so we have sky high expectations. People like Sheryl Sandberg are telling us this is the most important decision you'll ever make in your life. Dating is the skill that we're not taught. We lack relationship role models. And so really what I'm talking about is choosing who to invest in and feeling certain in your choice. That's really something that people are struggling with right now.
Yeah, I would like to debate you, but I'm basically convinced by your argument. I do think there's one
kind.
upside. I mean, there is
Yeah.
a real upside today,
Yeah.
which is I do think relative to the pre-internet or pre-apps era, you could really be like, there is no, if I don't want to go to a singles bar, like there's
Yeah.
no real option for me these days. And
Yeah.
and that's better today, but I agree with all the rest of what you said. It's like it is a tyranny, right? It's all
Yeah.
the stuff out there and the expectations and meeting them.
So one thing I'll add there, because I think people are generally interested in how dating has changed in the pandemic, is this is a trope that I have seen a few times, and I'm thinking of a particular friend. So this is a guy who I think is a great catch, notoriously single for the last 10 years. He would go from first date to first date, 3-month relationship to 3-month relationship. Nothing would ever turn into anything. And I think it's because he was always wondering what else is out there and he wasn't investing. But during the pandemic, when it was harder to meet up with people, it was harder to navigate intimacy, get somebody in your pod, when he did meet a wonderful woman, he saw her for who she was. He wasn't looking around the corner, who else is out there. He actually, what I would say, for the first time in 10 years, really invested in her. And they're moving in together this weekend. They just got a puppy. And I feel like that lack of choice is what made him value her, invest in the relationship, and get serious. And so somebody listening, thinking about that 80s bar, they might say, there was so few options, but did that lack of options make you value each person more and help you turn it into a relationship? Because, and Eli, I don't know if you agree with me on this, but people have this perception it's 99% the perfect partner and then 1% what you make of it. But we know that that's not true. And so if you take the pressure off partner selection and you say, I'm going to find someone great and make it work, that is actually a great recipe for finding love.
That's fascinating. And it's related to the next thing I wanted to ask you about. So you mentioned earlier, like F the spark, EFF, right? Is this how it's spelled, or is it the letter F? I never know how to spell that one.
I like to say the full word, but I would say
Okay.
the non-curse word is EFF.
EFF, right? So F the spark, and the logic, as I understand it, is that sure there is such a thing as chemistry, there is such a thing as attraction. You're not in denial. You're not
Of
denying that
course.
those things exist, but it's something that people are overweighting it, or they are viewing anything that doesn't have maximal spark as problematic. Like what is the issue with people saying when the right person comes, I'm gonna feel it and I'll know it's the right person? Why is that? Like, you're concerned about that in your book.
Yeah.
Why is that
Yeah.
so problematic?
I really like the way that you just stated it. I haven't heard it said like that before, but it's totally true. It's not that the spark is a problem, it's that people are overweighting it. And so, my experience with the spark, and the reason why I have this chapter called F the Spark, is that I was setting people up on dates as a matchmaker. I was hearing people in a dating coaching capacity coming to me and talking about their dates. And they would say, I met this guy, he was wonderful, we had a great conversation, it was a really fun date. I'm just not going to see him again. I didn't feel the spark. And so the spark has become my nemesis because it feels like this catch all word that means that somebody didn't feel this pang of instant chemistry that they were expecting. And so in the book, I debunk 3 myths of the spark. The first one is that the spark can't grow over time. And you and I both know this, that that's not true. Many of the happiest couples, they've known each other for years. I knew my husband for 8 years before we started dating. And lots of people end up marrying somebody from work, marrying somebody in their apartment building. The mere exposure effect, the more that you're around something, the more you like it. And so the spark can absolutely grow over time, and it's not a reason to reject someone. Number 2, people think if I feel the spark, then it must be a good thing. And we know that that's not true. Oftentimes, with attachment theory, people are mistaking anxiety for chemistry. And so what you're experiencing is actually something about that person. Maybe that person's really charismatic, really attractive, really sparky, and they give a lot of people this. And so you think, oh, it's this dynamic between us, we have a connection. No, maybe they're a narcissist. They're just giving a lot of people the spark. And the third thing is that people get very obsessed with the how we met story. And so the third myth is if you experience a spark, then it must be a viable relationship. And that's just not true. A lot of divorced couples felt the spark. It's certainly not a reason to stay together. Don't stay in the wrong relationship because you met the right way. And so my antidote, and I'm curious what you think about this, is to go for the slow burn. And that's the person who's not initially charming, who doesn't knock your socks off in the first date. And they don't necessarily give people the spark, but they're reliable, they're kind, they're emotionally stable, they're loyal. They would be a great long-term partner. And how can we retrain people to look for the slow burn? And I wrote the book really with in mind people going on second dates and looking for the slow burn, but I'm getting a lot of emails from people saying, I'm the slow burn. Thank you for giving me more access to second dates because it just takes me time to open up, but I know I'll be a great long-term partner.
Yeah. Well, you're talking to somebody who was set up with his wife by his 84-year-old Jewish grandmother. So I think I'm not obsessed with the meet cute. So this is as good a time as any, I think. I wanted to I hope you don't mind, Logan. I wanted to take a couple little moments just to read little excerpts from the book
Fun,
because
please.
you bring in there are other books, I know them, that are relationship books based on the science. You're not the first to do that, and there are other books that are meant for the public and do a good job from maybe therapists who have clinical practice and good examples. But this book hits the sweet spot in a way that I have never seen, and it is written in a fun way. So this is from a chapter called "This is not a date." I'm sorry, this is a date, not a job interview, where you lay out a 10-step strategy for having better dates. You sort of observe that like there's norms around these dates that kind of make them terrible, right? Like something like the resume exchange. So this is just one little bit in one of the 10 parts. You're saying, make sure it's fun, and you say have fun, be silly, make a joke. Humor is a great tool to create a sense of play. When we laugh, our brains release a happy cocktail of hormones, changing our psychology. Laughing releases oxytocin, the same bonding hormone released during breastfeeding, and makes us trust the other person more. And then parenthetically, and if it's oxytocin we're after, laughing is a more socially appropriate activity on a first date than breastfeeding. This does not come in the form of a question for you, but in the form of an illustration for the folks who are listening about what the book feels like.
I appreciate that. I worked hard on I was like, I have to keep this breastfeeding joke in. How can I make it work?
Stuck
I'm
the
glad
landing
I think
on that.
I landed it. Yeah.
Yeah, you did. Okay. we've mostly talked about, we talked about sort of your career stuff. Now
Sure.
we've talked about the dating landscape. We've talked about dating in the pandemic. I want to pivot to, I guess is maybe the second and really the third part of your book, which is really about relationships. So once we're in these things, how do they work? What makes them better? How do we know if they're the right fit and so forth? So first off, you introduce a concept that I love, and it's called the wardrobe test. Tell us what that is.
Yes, absolutely. And so when I set out to do this work and to think about decision making in relationships, I never expected to do something that I now call breakup consulting. And what that really means is that people call me and they say, I'm in this relationship. Should I stay or should I go? And it almost feels like this rabbinical responsibility, right? You're holding not just one person's relationship in your hand, it's two people's emotions. And I do take this really seriously. And there's a lot of, moral naughtiness to this, but I have developed a framework for how I help people really come to their own conclusion around this. And so the first thing I do when people have this question is I talk to them about their historical tendency in relationships. And I either call them hitchers or ditchers. And hitchers tend to stay in relationships too long. They suffer from sunk cost fallacy. They say, I've been dating her for 4 years and the first year was great and the last 3 years were bad, but it's 4 years. Shouldn't I just keep going? Or they have loss aversion. They're afraid to give it up. The status quo bias, right? They just want to keep going in the direction they're going. And so hitchers tend to stay in relationships past their expiration date. The opposite of that is the ditcher. And this is the person who stays in relationships for way too short. This is like my friend who I was describing before. They jump from 3-month relationship to 3-month relationship. And I have found that their biggest issue is that they confuse falling in love with being in love. And falling in love is a wonderful experience, but relationships go through many phases and the honeymoon period doesn't last forever. And so instead of investing in a person and getting through the different phases, they just say, oh, I want to fall in love with somebody else. And so the first thing I do is I say, do you have this tendency to stay for too long or too short? And that sort of guides the rest of the conversation. And then there's other questions that we go through, some influenced by the all or nothing marriage, things like your chapter on recalibration, right? Is there an external factor that is going on? Is one of you have a sick parent, a sick child, losing a job? Is there something else going on that is temporary and external? Are you bringing your best self to the relationship? Is there more that you could do? But surprisingly, one of the most powerful questions that I found and something I developed is what I call the wardrobe test question. And this is when I say to someone, if your partner were a piece of clothing, something in your closet that you own, what would they be? And I have gotten the strangest answers. People say, this one guy said, my boyfriend is a wool sweater. He keeps me warm, but it's very itchy, so then I have to take it off. Or this woman said, my boyfriend is like a scrubby old t-shirt that I would wear to the gym, but I would hope nobody would see me. And people almost gasp when they say this because they are being honest with themselves in a way that they haven't when they're just in their head speaking, speaking from the brain about what they think versus from the heart or gut around how they feel. And so sometimes I get lovely answers. My girlfriend is my favorite pair of pants that I never would have bought, but I bought for themselves. And so the wardrobe test question is this fun, quirky way of really getting to the heart of how you feel about a relationship. And I found it really does help both hitchers and ditchers decide whether to stay or go.
I do love it. And I'm going to put you on the spot here because I don't think
Sure.
this is something you directly address in the
Yeah.
book. But as I was
Yeah.
listening to you just now, I thought, well, what if somebody wants a wardrobe? Like, what if I want to have like the comfy pajamas, but also the little black dress? And to what degree? I mean, so this is a broader question about, the gist is like, how do you find that special someone? That's a lot of what the book is about. But what about this idea that is gaining traction, especially among
Sure.
younger Americans, that maybe one permanent person for a lifetime is not really the way to do it, and there's a range of needs that we have, and maybe we want somebody who's like the ski outfit and somebody who's the PJs. Like, what do you make of that? Is that a sensible thing to try for?
I mean, first of all, I'm super happy to talk about polyamory. What I would say about the the wardrobe test question is, it's not trying to say your partner should be the one little black dress that you always wear or your favorite pair of leggings. It's just supposed to help you triangulate, like, this is how I feel. But I understand the essence of the question, which is, what if people are into open relationships? And I love the examples you gave. What if you want somebody that makes you feel sexy and desired, and then another person that makes you feel secure? And I would say, living in the Bay Area, I've been exposed to a lot of non-monogamy, and I think that a lot of people, it works for them. I mean, I have a friend who basically said, I think that if I weren't in a non-monogamous marriage, I would have cheated on my wife. And his identity, his orientation in his mind is being non-monogamous. And having this conversation with his wife has really given him the freedom to show up in the relationship. And there's this feeling like people who are in open relationships are having sex all the time. That's actually just not true. I think a lot of people in open relationships are having conversations all the time, because it's basically like your relationship is your hobby and there's a lot of negotiation. But I've seen very successful non-monogamous relationships, because if you think about it, at the crux of it is transparency and communication. And so if those are strengths and you can navigate a relationship that works for you and you can negotiate and change over time, then that's probably a relationship that is more likely to succeed, because those are skills that are correlated with long-term relationship success. Things like not feeling like you can share with your partner, cheating, not getting what you want, that's not a happy relationship. And so I think that people put monogamy on a pedestal, but it's not that we should put non-monogamy on a pedestal. It's that we should put communication and transparency on a pedestal.
So let me give you another scenario. So let's say I've been together with somebody for 15 years, but truly the last 5 or 10 years have been at best mediocre. And there's still love there.
Yeah.
But the passion has definitely faded, and in fact is now a source of tension in the relationship. And I'm in my 40s and feel like, my goodness, I hope to have a lot of good decades ahead of me. How does one go about thinking about making a really serious decision to stay or to leave a long-term loving relationship, especially if they're married?
Yeah, I mean, I should say humbly that the breakup consulting I've done is not people who are married with kids. And I do think that, there's just a whole, when you're talking about divorce, when you're talking about childcare, when you're talking about an interwoven family, that is something different. And so I'm not going to claim expertise in that area. I mean, a lot of what I'll say is very influenced by you in the book. And it's things like, is it time to recalibrate? Do you have young kids at home? And is this not going to be the peak moment of your marriage? Is there something going on with you? Is there mental health stuff from the pandemic? I think just being compassionate with yourself in the relationship. Also saying, are my expectations of what year 15 feels like? Are those realistic? And maybe talking to friends, what does year 15 feel like for you? I would say that there's a lot of evidence that being in a healthy relationship is good for people long-term health, but that's not also a reason to stay. I think sometimes, I got a question on Reddit the other day, is it better to stay in a bad relationship than be alone? And I would say definitely not. And so that is a naughty question that I don't think I'm necessarily the expert on, but I think the answer is that there's no one clear answer. It's not, if you're not having passionate sex, then clearly this isn't your soulmate. And it's also not, what did you think year 15 would be? Clearly you should stay. I think that there's a lot more, and that person could explore for themselves. How are they showing up to the relationship? How can they add novelty? And what can they do to really create the relationship they want? Because their partner's probably feeling the same.
So at a practical level, let's say people have been together for just a couple of years and are dating. Let's say there aren't kids involved, just to simplify the example. At a practical level, it's stressful to make that decision, and then it's stressful to implement it. So let's say you realize this isn't something that I'm willing to keep working at, that I think this is not a good fit for me for the long run, and I need to make better decisions with my life than stay with something that's really just not working. Any thoughts on what people can do, like just very practically, like to think well about how to go about breaking up with someone?
Yeah, so I have a chapter in the book that is exactly that. And I basically take the research from goal setting theory and I apply it to breaking up, because breaking up's not the right thing for everyone. But if you're determined to do it, how can you set it as a goal and actually achieve it? And the reason I wrote this chapter is that in all the breakup consulting, I found that people made these really terrible mistakes as they were going through breakups. And some of the things are, creating an incentive structure for yourself, saying, this is really important to me, I want to do it. And this is not for the faint of heart, but I even had a client who said, if I don't break up with my girlfriend by the date I set, I'm going to write a $10,000 check to my least favorite presidential candidate and give it to a friend, and he can mail it into his reelection campaign if I don't do this. So finding the accountability partner, creating incentives, just being compassionate about when and where you do it, right? Like, if I were dating somebody and I had this event with you and they broke up with me right before, that's unfair. I don't want to show up for this event being totally not present because I'm thinking about the breakup. So think about the timing, practice what you're going to say. Also be clear. I think, one of our mutual heroes or people we respect, Alain de Botton, I interviewed him for the book and he said, don't be the Mr. Nice breakup guy, because that's really to make yourself feel better. So don't check in all the time on their birthday. Don't be the person they turn to. They need someone else to get through the breakup. And I would also say there's lots of research suggesting don't have breakup sex. It makes it harder for you to stay in your commitment of breaking up. It makes it harder for the person to move on. And the final tip I'll give is I like to give my clients something called a text support chart, which is basically, it's kind of like OSOs. It's like, I used to watch this show with my partner, now I'll watch it with the friend. I used to jog with my partner, now I'll jog with my mom. What are the things you used to go to for your partner that will be hard and there'll be chances for you to slip back into dating them? Who are you going to go to for that? And so these are the people you text when those things come up.
I love that. And some of that stuff I myself found not that intuitive, right? Like the idea that, maybe the kind thing to do when you break up is not to check in and make sure the person's okay, right? I find that to be a non-intuitive idea. And most of us would like to be generous and kind, especially to somebody that we probably still have some real feelings for. And it sounds like at least you're suggesting that in the average case, the kinder thing to do is to afford a real break, and then maybe work toward friendship later, but at least for now, allow that person to have the separation that she or he needs.
Yeah, and of course there's nuance. I mean, if you share a cat, if you share an apartment, you need to have these conversations. But I think that the real message there is that when you are checking in, are you doing it for their benefit or are you actually doing it for your own? And if the answer is you're doing it to make yourself feel better, that's not necessarily the kind thing to do.
So I have many more questions for you, but I really do want to make sure there's enough time if people want to
Great.
chime in. I don't know what the norms are here. Lonnie, do you have an opinion? Do you think we should get started by opening things up?
Started. They're pouring in. We have 14
Oh, wow.
questions. People are waiting. The hot plate is sizzling. So let's go for it. I would say. So let's start with our first question because it also got upvoted, which is from Maru. She asks, how do you decide that someone who is coming to you for dating coaching could benefit from therapy? Logan, you're muted for some reason. There you
Here
go.
I am.
There you
Yeah, I that's definitely something that I've experienced a lot. I've had people who come to me and they say, I go on 30 to 50 dates a year and I'm putting in all the effort and I really just need you to introduce me to the right person. And then we start talking and I just feel like this person's putting in the effort, but it's not about the effort. They've likely already dated somebody who'd be a good fit. It's about something internal going on with them. And, I don't diagnose them as being depressed or having something else, but I say to them, I don't think that being strategic with me about decision making and planning a date is actually what's going on for you. I don't want to take your money. Why don't you invest in therapy? Why don't you work on some of this inner stuff? There's some themes that I'm picking up on here that I think would be a great fit to explore with a therapist, and come back to me in a month or 6 months or a year, and then let's get together and work strategically. And so I've definitely had people that I refer to therapists to deal with some of the deeper issues that I don't feel qualified to do. I would also say many people I work with are working with the therapist in parallel. And that's sort of part of overcoming the hesitator tendency. Because if you're a person who thinks, oh, I'm so messed up and I have to solve every issue I've ever had and then I'll start dating, well, lots of us are still messed up. How old are you going to be when you start dating? And so work with that person on the deep work and work with me on getting yourself out there. And I think that, obviously that's expensive, but if that's a combination that people can do, it really helps them gain those dating skills while also gain that self-knowledge through therapy.
I think it's also true because sometimes, depending on the type of therapy you're in, some therapists are less willing to give direct
Yes.
instruction to a
Yes.
client, whereas
Right.
I think you're probably somewhat more fond of giving some direct instruction or saying,
Yeah.
here's some tips, here's some tricks to try doing these kind of things, and so that's also
And
probably a nice
you
balance
know
there.
what I mean? I've been on the dating apps. I've ghosted. I've been ghosting. I swiped left on my now husband on Tinder. And so I think a lot of great therapists out there, including my mother-in-law, they can talk about dating, but they don't have the tactical experience. And so I am hoping that therapists start recommending my book and that it sort of becomes something that you can read along with your therapist as you're doing some of the deeper why work. And the book is more of the what and the how.
Or if they do have the tactical experience, they're not necessarily bringing it into the therapy.
That's true. That is a great point,
Just to be
Lonnie.
clear.
Yeah.
Yes, let's go with Jennifer has been upvoted here. She says, I'm 31 and have been super single for 10 years, focused on career, friendships, and moving. I've been saying for a few years that I want to focus on finding a partner, but have put little to no effort into it. I'm not lonely. I just happen to be alone. But I think I remember loving to be in love. Oh, hold on. Okay, it went up and down. What do you say to people like me who don't prioritize dating and when starting up again, just get turned off immediately by the process and go back to not trying?
Yeah. So what I would say to this person, you sound like many people that I've worked with, 31 and super single. That sounds like many of my clients. And the first thing I would say is that I have in my book this three dating tendencies, and one of them is the hesitator. And for without knowing a lot about you, you sound like the hesitator. And so the hesitator is that person who says, "I'll be ready to date when," and they always come up with excuses, and some of them are valid. Investing in your friends is valid. Moving cities is valid. Investing in work is valid. But you're saying that your goal is to meet a partner, but I'm not hearing you put the effort into meeting someone. And so we just had the first question about therapy. What is holding you back from putting yourself out there? Is it fear of rejection? Is it not knowing what you want? Is it not having gotten over a breakup in the past? What is the thing that when you start the kind of daily work of dating, the apps, the messaging, like I get it. It is effortful and it is work, but what is the thing that's making that so hard for you? And so I would encourage you to explore that. In the book, I have this checklist for hesitators, things like choose a deadline. I am going to start dating in 3 weeks. Work on reinforcing your dater identity. I am a dater. I am someone who's looking to date. Um, get the pictures, work on your stories. What are the things that are going to help you show up better on the date? But really, tell your friends, say 2021 is my year. I'm going to find someone, hold me to it. And so this is where the behavioral science toolkit comes in. What are all the places where you're going to drop off and fail? And how can we create these buttresses that keep you on the path? Because I've worked with lots of 31-year-old super single hesitators, and you can find someone, but you do need to first show up.
Got it. All right, from Lisa, she asks, she's a therapist, and what she says is she's got a number of single female clients who are totally ready to toss in the dating towel because their experience has been so awful with online dating. She says, do you have any tips for people who have completely lost hope?
Yeah, so first I'll just say that dating burnout is very real, especially right now during the pandemic. And so last night I was actually interviewing a therapist who I admire. Her name's Dr. Emily Anhalt. And I was saying, does it feel like everyone's hitting a wall? I really liked what she said. She said, we have these internal resources and we have been in fight or flight mode for the last 12 months and we have just used them up. So you don't have that battery to pull from because you've already used it up. And so everyone's on edge. People have experienced economic insecurity, heartbreak, death. People are just going through a hard time. And so I think that if you're dating and you feel like throwing in the towel, can we reframe that to say you need a break from dating? You're going to take a month off. You're going to get more sleep. You're going to eat healthy. You're going to cook some new recipes. You're going to listen to some podcasts you can talk about on a date and then get back out there. And so effort matters, but if you're showing up with the wrong mindset, it's not going to work. Whether
Oh,
you think the date will go poorly or you think the date will go well, you're right. And so actually taking that month off and starting fresh is a better strategy than just sort of powering through it.
Kitty asks, what are your thoughts about, she calls it, I don't know if it's LAT or LAT, living apart together as a dating relationship option?
Yeah, so I first learned about living apart together through Helen Fisher, who is a wonderful biological anthropologist. Has she joined you at FAN, or you know
No,
her
she's on
work?
my list.
Oh, she's incredible.
I
And
know.
so she
Beautiful work.
is, she's in her 70s. She's a biological anthropologist. She's done some of the most interesting work. She puts people into a brain scan. She looks at the fMRI. She can say, okay, the nucleus accumbens light up when you're falling in love and when you're addicted to cocaine. What does that mean about falling in love? What does that mean about heartbreak? Anyway, she told me that at her stage of life, with her, her beautiful apartment and her established life, living apart together was very appealing for her. And so what I would say is, whether it's LAT, whether it's non-monogamy, whether it's long distance, figure it out. There's this entire menu of what you want, and you get to choose from it. We are not destined to these toaster marriages of the past, where it's one toaster for everyone and you plug it in and you hope it works and doesn't get worse. You should be designing a relationship, and if that's what works for you, great. You might be having more sex than a couple that shares a bed.
Dana asks, how long should you give a new partner a chance to impress you or change bad habits? And how soon can you know someone's character?
Yeah, I mean, I would like to hear Eli's thoughts on this, but
Yeah,
I
me
can give
too.
a couple off the top of my head. And so one thing I would say is, in the book, I say make the second date the default. And this is the idea that you should go for the slow burn, and some people take time to open up. But a dating coach this week asked me, well, is it date 3? Is it date 5? And look, I don't have a scientific answer that after this date, you really know who they are. In fact, in the breakup coaching I've done, I've seen that 6 months tends to be this time where people sort of take off their masks and show you who you are. And I don't think you should be going on 6 months worth of date with someone you may or may not like. And so I think the point is, this is an art, it's a science. People take time to show you who you are, but there are these key things that you can look for. And so one of them is loyalty. Does this person have friends from different stages of their lives? Is this the type of person who helps somebody move? Kindness. Are they nice to people who they don't need anything from? Are they nice to the wait staff? Are they nice to their mail person? Emotional stability. Do they react or do they respond? And how can you sort of read between the lines to say, in the dynamics that I can observe, how are they showing up? And growth mindset. Are they somebody who thinks life is just handed to you and you do the best you can, or do they think you can improve? And so you really want to align yourself with a team member who is going to go through life with you. And I'm not saying you can totally assess character in a month, but you can use the data available to understand who someone is.
Eli, want to jump in, Eli? You got more
I
to
mean,
add?
maybe briefly. I mean, Logan is, I mean, mainly sort of while reading your book, these are some thoughts, but we get to decide, on a date. We go on a date and we get to decide, like, did that person have anything that's a deal breaker? Or we get to decide, did that person have anything that makes me think it would be worth the second one?
Mm-hmm.
And the difference between those two mindsets is absolutely gigantic in terms of whether you're willing to explore, whether there's something to be brought out here that might not have been immediately obvious. And Logan, as you note, there are strong individual differences on who presents well in, like, on a 30-minute coffee date or over a pint of beer. And there's a lot of people who may not flourish under that circumstance, but if they're going on dates with people who say, is there something here? Is there something here that might be worth cultivating,
Mm-hmm.
that might be worth considering? People will go on a lot more second dates. And look, they might not love all those second dates,
Mm-hmm.
but there's a decent chance that one or more of them will become something special.
That's exactly how I feel.
Yeah.
Okay,
I got it from
Susan
you.
Sorry, Susan asks, I'm female, over 70, and have been divorced for 9 years after a long marriage. I have dated online and have had fun experiences, but no full-time partner. What dating advice do you have for those in my age group?
Yeah, so this is something that I've really been exploring since the book came out. And so I will say, a lot of my work as a dating coach is people in their 20s and 30s, occasionally 40s. These are my peers. These are millennials. Hinge's broadest group is millennials. And so I have been getting a lot of emails since the book came out saying, I'm over 40, 50, 60, 70. Can you help me? And honestly, I almost want to pose the question back to them and say, read the book. Did this feel helpful? And I think some of the truths are universal. Go for the person who's kind over the person who's sparky. Go for the life partner over the prom date. Some things are different, like a breakup is going to be very different with kids and a house and when you're married. Or deciding whether or not you should get married is pretty different after the age of having kids. Some of your values around religion and stuff, that can be different. But I think in the end, my advice is just, how are you showing up on dates? Are you ready to connect? Are you being authentic? Are you cynical? Are you saying, well, the last 9 years didn't work out. Why is this date going to work out? Or do you say, it's me and you, and we have 45 minutes to have a fun time. And even if we're not a romantic match, at least I got to learn about something new and have an experience. And so really it's having a profile that shows who you are, being open to different types of people and throwing out your checklist, and really designing dates that are all about connection as opposed to evaluation.
Andrew asks, what if your favorite pair of pants feels great but doesn't give you intellectual satisfaction? Is it too much to want my pants to give me everything, or at least more than one thing?
Yeah, I want to know the answer to that one too.
Eli, you take your book
No,
is
I don't
called,
know the answer.
isn't it called The All or Nothing Pants?
Yeah, well, maybe. Yeah, that's the sequel. It'll be out soon.
I mean, I think we can take this one together. I mean, it's very humorous, but I think it depends. It's what do you want to get out of a relationship? And I feel like reading between the lines there, they're saying these are great pants, but these are not the pants I want. And I do not take any advice based on this event. But I think the point is that this isn't something scientific that has been researched. This is a way, it's sort of this Rorschach test to really get at how you're feeling. And what I'm hearing is these are great pants for someone, but they're not the pants that I want.
Got it. Srikant asks, as a divorced mid-40s dad of a 9-year-old who I am the primary caretaker for, I am hesitant to think of dating and feel guilty if I will be prioritizing my need for companionship if I start dating again. How should I get off the ground and avoid cold feet?
I did an event last week where a single dad was saying, how do I present the fact that I have a 9-year-old daughter? And so I don't know if that's part of the question, but I'll just say, I think leading with your situation and what's going on is a very important thing to do, because you're immediately going to filter out the people who aren't interested in dating, a dad with a kid. And I work with plenty of women who are in their late 30s or 40s. I don't know if you're interested in men or women, but plenty of people who are saying a divorced dad is exactly what I want. I want to raise somebody else's kid with them. I don't want to have a kid. That sounds perfect to me. And so I think part of it is just understanding that whatever you are, there's somebody out there looking for that thing. But first you have to show that person that you're even available. Getting off the ground, I would say the same advice that I said to the hesitator. Make a deadline. I'm going to date by this date. Find an accountability buddy. I want to date this year. Will you hold me to it? Get some pictures. Get a profile that you're proud of, and just put in daily effort, or every other day, log in for 15 minutes, send some likes, send some comments. It takes effort, but you're gonna get on some dates that are really energizing. And I would say, I am not a parent, and so Eli, feel free to interrupt me, but I think one of the best things you can do for your kid is model the type of life that you want them to lead. And you deserve companionship just as much as everyone else. And once you're in a relationship, taking time to invest in it, that's not selfish. That's actually modeling for your child what healthy partnership looks like.
I want to remind everybody, we got just a couple minutes left. I remind everybody to, you definitely want to come to After Hours today. It's going to be a rollicking good time. All conversation cameras are on. You can ask your questions directly, and it's a nice interactive experience. We've been putting in chat the links to buy Logan's book. Let's buy Logan's book. Come chat with her. We're going to start. She gets Eli and Logan both get a 5-minute bio break in between, but we'll be opening up the room at about 8:05. So just remind folks, go get that book and let's have some more chatting. We're going to squeeze in another quick question, which is that, let's see, this one woman, where did she just go? She wanted to know about senior chat rooms. Melissa wants to know about senior chat rooms and speed dating events. She's divorced in her 50s. So wants to know, what are your thoughts on these? Are you familiar? Do you know? Probably you do.
Eli's really done some of the best research out there on speed dating.
Speed dating. I don't know about senior chat rooms. I think that Tinder kind of killed speed dating. I think speed dating is much less of a thing than it was a while ago. And I think the reason why is because once the apps came, once it wasn't like the old style Match.com or eHarmony, but allowed the spontaneity to say, well, who's nearby right now? Then I just think that kind of killed speed dating. So to my knowledge, it is not a large thing anymore. I do think there are still speed dating events, but it doesn't have the same cultural currency as it did.
All right, now let's.
Yeah, I can add some color there. Pre-pandemic, I ran a singles speed dating event informed by some of Eli's findings, some of the work by Sheena Iyengar, other people in the space, and one thing that I found was that I had, it was a straight dating event, 27 men, 27 women, 70 dates came out of it. When I interviewed people later and I said, would you have swiped right on this person on the app? Many people wrote back and said, I wouldn't have even seen them on the app because I would have filtered them out by age, height, and religion. And so the lesson is that you should expand your parameters and your filters. And at this event, I was able to get people to overcome that. But if you're watching, you know, open up your app and expand your parameters because you think you know what you want, but you might be wrong.
And there is a question, and I think for those less comfortable with online dating and apps and dating apps, recognizing, of course, your work with Hinge. What if it's sort of, let's imagine a moment when we're not so much in COVID. What would you just say to somebody, if not apps, then what?
Yeah, I have a chapter in the book called How to Meet People IRL in Real Life, and this will be more relevant after the pandemic's over. But what I think is the most original thing in there is something I created called the events decision matrix. And so it looks like this, and basically you think about all possible events and you chart them based on what is the likelihood that I'm going to enjoy this event, and what is the likelihood that I'm going to interact with someone there. And if it falls in this upper right hand corner, then you go to both of those, you go to that event. And here's why: even if you don't meet someone, at least you had a good time. It's the type of event you want. And if you're going to spend time on an event, it might as well be something like a small dinner party or a workshop where you're going to actually have conversation. And
Right.
so one of the things is just go to more events. Other things you can do are ask your friends to set you up and play matchmaker 2. Look around your group of friends. Is there someone there who's a friend who could be more than a friend? Go to places where people are likely to be open to conversation even during the pandemic. So something like a dog park where people are just sitting around waiting, and really understand that a lot of people are also feeling isolated. And so as long as you're not, I would say, creepy about it, comment on the situation, look at someone's eye contact, do they see open to it, and see if you can really turn an attraction into a friendship, into something more.
Reminds me too of John Cassiopo's work where about loneliness, where he always suggests, volunteer.
Oh yeah, there's
you get-
lots of research on volunteering. Yeah, and Nicholas Epley also, who's
Yes.
from, I believe, Booth, and maybe you've had him before. He did this great research, mistakenly seeking solitude. People think they want to sit alone on the bus, but you're much happier talking to somebody. And so take that research and say, in the end, a conversation with a stranger feels better than sitting alone with your headphones on.
Exactly. Okay, we are at 8:01. Oh, we're a minute out.
You're so
Logan,
close. It's my
Eli,
fault.
great conversation. Can't wait to continue in just a few minutes. Thanks everybody for
Thanks so
coming.
much
And
for
we hope
having
to
us.
see you Monday with Doctors Burgoyne and Torres Gregory looking at core needs post-pandemic. I'm sure that's another long list. So thank you so much. It's been a great night.